When I look at the strongest parallels between championship caliber hockey teams and high performing engineering teams, there's really three things that stand out to me: how you adapt to team dynamics, accountability, and performing under pressure.
Hello, I'm your host, Sam East, and welcome to Diverse, a sweet podcast. Today's guest, Katherine Beaumier, knows what it means to perform under pressure, whether that's on the ice in a national championship game or leading teams through complex engineering challenges. Katherine is a chemical engineer, a remote operations project execution lead at ExxonMobil, and a two-time Division I women's ice hockey national champion. I'm excited to discuss the parallels she's seeing between hockey and engineering leadership, plus what we can learn from having passions outside of the workplace. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Diverse.
Oh, thanks, Sam. I'm so excited to be here and thrilled to join you all. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yes, I mean, you have a very interesting backstory. So, as we love to do, let's take it back to the beginning. What is the origin story, Katherine? How did you get involved in STEM? What really sparked that curiosity in you? Do you remember a moment?
For me, STEM really started at home. Everyone in my immediate family is a chemical engineer. So engineering was the atmosphere that I grew up in. It was our dinner table conversations. It was our problem solving style. It was our family identity. And STEM wasn't really something I stumbled into. It was the world I watched every day. And because of that, I never really had a dramatic aha moment where I knew I wanted to be an engineer. Honestly, I can't think of a time I ever considered a non-STEM path. And instead, that was really the environment that my family created. And it's the space of curiosity was encouraged and asking all those why questions. And that was just the family culture that naturally pulled me into STEM.
So, it was always a very supportive environment for you in that sense.
Oh, yes. I have a brother who's also a chemical engineer, and there was no difference of like, well, Catherine, your brother can do it and you can't because you got to go chase other things. There was no opportunity where we weren't given an advantage either way to just go chase what we were interested in.
Well, speaking of chasing what you're interested in, as we, covered off the top there, engineering, yes, a big part of your life, but also hockey alongside that. What drew you to hockey and how did that journey evolve to eventually competing? Because this isn't just a hobby for you. You are a champion.
Hockey became part of my life in the most unexpected, kid-like way possible. Where I grew up, we had a semi-pro hockey team, the Tri-City Americans, and during hockey intermissions, they ran this crowd game called Chuck a Puck. And essentially, it's where fans would toss bright orange foam pucks from the stands onto different kind of prize targets on the ice. And then at the end of, the Chuck a Puck intermission, all of the youth hockey players got to skate out and pick up all these pucks. And I remember watching them and turning to my dad and saying, I'm going to do that. And the tiny, almost just like throwaway moment was all it took. And I was hooked before I even knew it. And then once I started playing, I fell in love with the game, the speed, the physicality, the way hockey demands, just creativity, but also grit. And then as I got older and more serious, we ran into kind of a big challenge. And at the time, there weren't many competitive girls teams in Washington State. So if I wanted to play at a higher level, I had to look somewhere else. And the closest option for that was actually from Washington State to Southern California, the Lady Ducks program in Anaheim. So when I was, probably 14, my parents made the incredible life-changing decision and they let me chase my dream. And so I moved to Irvine, and billeted is the term they use, with a teammate of mine, her family. And it was kind of like going to college early. I'd come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas in the summers, but the rest of the year I was in Southern California training, competing, juggling high school, and honestly grown up pretty fast. And it was a big leap at 14, but it taught me a lot about independence and what it really means to commit to something you love. And playing for the Lady Ducks opened doors that just simply didn't exist back home, because the top competition for women's hockey at the time was actually on the East Coast. So while Southern California was the closest program to Washington, we would still fly back east once a month to go to major scouting tournaments. And it was at one of those tournaments that college coaches began to notice me. And that's how I eventually got recruited by Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York, where I went and got my chemical engineering degree. And that's kind of where it all comes full circle. I played Division I hockey at Clarkson, and during my freshman and sophomore years, we won back-to-back national championships. And being a part of a championship team, it's something that's hard to put into words, because there's this mix of pressure and trust and just absolute belief in one another. And you go through early morning practices and long road trips and tough losses and big wins, and the grind of balancing academics with a full-time athletic schedule. And then one moment it all clicks, and you're standing there on the ice with your teammates after winning a national title or two, and knowing that everything that you sacrificed and all the efforts you put up, you can look around to everyone that was with you along the way to getting there and know that you did this together. And that feeling's really stayed with me, and it's really shaped how I lead and how I work and how I show up.
You started mentioning how academia, but also your hockey career were starting to overlap. Was there ever a point where you had to choose one?
I fortunately was really lucky that I never had to choose. Getting a chemical engineering degree and playing Division I hockey, it is, choosing your priorities. But I had great teammates and I had a great coaching staff that if it was like, hey, I have this lab that's 6 hours on Thursday for this semester, I can't make practice. And they were like, okay, we understand. Can we do something early in the morning? Can you show up after? And coaching staff was really fantastic about being like, you're a student athlete, you're a student first, and we will make sure that we can put athletics around like things that the school cannot accommodate one person in the entire 60 student class for. And so I was really blessed to have that team around me to help me support, getting a degree and playing hockey.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word grit and all of those kind of qualities and emotions that come up while you were training, while you were playing hockey. How did that background in sports really influence your journey to becoming a professional engineer?
I would say the transition from a college athlete to a professional engineer is was honestly pretty tough. I graduated and started my career at ExxonMobil right in the middle of COVID-19. So that was during 2020, peak pandemic time. So not
Yeah.
only was I moving to Houston, a brand new city to me, and starting my first, real job, but I was doing it at a time when everything was just shut down and
Mm.
uncertain and pretty isolating. And so after spending years in this just very highly structured, high energy environment surrounded by, teammates and coaches and constant feedback, and honestly a really clear sense of like identity and who I was, and stepping into the engineering workforce during the global pandemic was a big 180 for me. And there was a big emotional and identity shift. And in college, hockey wasn't just, something I did. It was a huge part of who I was. It was a huge part of my entire life. And you go from being a part of a team with a really defined role to entering a world where you have to rebuild your sense of confidence and credibility and belonging from the ground up. And one thing that made an enormous difference for me during the pandemic and starting was the people really at ExxonMobil. Even though, most things were virtual, and every person I interacted with was incredibly just patient and supportive and genuinely committed to helping early career engineers learn and succeed. And that Sense of community really made an uncertain time feel manageable. That's really where hockey probably started to show up a little bit more in my professional life in an unexpected kind of ways. And maybe one of my biggest early career aha moments was realizing how important flexibility is and how much of that came from my experience in sports. Because in hockey, your role isn't a fixed box. You can be a leader whether or not you wear a letter. You might be on special teams, depending on what the team needs, but you get to learn and adapt constantly to new situations and new line combinations and new challenges. And you show up, put me where you need me, coach kind of mentality. And that really translated to engineering because in some of my early roles, I learned pretty quickly that the job on the paper is just a starting point. You get to grow into responsibilities that weren't technically assigned to you and stepping up when a project needs support or taking initiative when something kind of falls between the cracks or even being the go-to person simply because you show interest or you're a credible person for it. And that's what happens on a team, from engineering or hockey. You fill the gaps, you evolve, and you contribute in whatever way helps the group succeed.
I'm sure these parallels were discussed in this talk that you gave at We25 called Building Trust Like a Championship Team, Lessons from Hockey and Engineering, which the title alone, I'm hooked. But what were some of the strongest parallels that really stuck out to you that you saw between high performing hockey teams and engineering teams? And I just find it so interesting because already here in you talking about this, you talked about, your defined role on your team and how when you were starting out in your engineering career, that was still yet to be defined.
Yeah. So when I gave my We 25 talk, I kicked it off with kind of a simple one liner, which is that trust is the game changer. And I think everything builds off of that. When I look at the strongest parallels between championship caliber hockey teams and high performing engineering teams, there's really three things that stand out to me: how you adapt to team dynamics, accountability, and performing under pressure. Adapting to team dynamics. In hockey, your teams, they shift daily, injuries, new line combinations, new opponents. You have to be able to adapt week over week pretty quickly and trust that the people around you do the same. Engineering teams operate the same way. I mean, you evolve projects, your stakeholders change, your priorities shift, you jump into new work with new people all the time. And in my career, I've learned that teams who succeed aren't the ones that are built on the most rigid plans. They're the ones who adapt together. For accountability, one of the clearest parallels to me between sports and engineering is accountability. In hockey, accountability is immediate. You miss your assignment, you blow your coverage, the team feels it right away. Like there's no blame. It's just, hey, that's my bad. And you go out to the next shift and you don't let it happen again. It's immediate. It's a great feedback loop. And I think engineering mirrors that. When you say you're going to deliver something, people count on you. And early in my career, I learned pretty quickly that accountability, it's not about being perfect. It's about communicating and taking ownership. And when something goes wrong, being someone that the team can rely on, be the person that stands up and says, like, all right, this is an error here and this is how we're going to get back on track. Like, I don't think being perfect has to be a factor in how you drive accountability. And then the last one was performing under pressure. The biggest thing that sports has taught me is to stay calm when the stakes are high. Overtime, playoffs, championships, games, you have to learn how to, you know, run your game, slow everything down, go back. You've been preparing for this for the past, 8 months. Yeah, it's a big day, but trust on all your preparation. And engineering has high pressure moments too. You've got tight deadlines and operational challenges and fast moving decisions. And hockey's really come in here with me to keep perspective and breathe. And what's the next actionable step you need to take in helping people that get overwhelmed by the big picture and going back into, we can control our controllables, like what is within our control, and we need to leave the outside factors out of this decision, out of this room, and being able to perform under pressure without losing composure or your teamwork is really a big advantage that sports has given me in the engineering world. And long story short, ultimately these traits matter because engineering is a team sport. It's technical and it's complex, but success still comes down to people who trust each other, adapt together, hold themselves accountable, and stay steady under pressure. And those are the exact qualities that make a championship hockey team too. They're the same qualities that make teams perform at their best.
I mean, it's obvious from what you've detailed there that perfection's not the goal, but you're a high performer and you have been from a young age, from the hockey journey, the engineering journey. Was there a moment, whether that was on the ice or in the world of engineering, when you thought, oh, this is what a high performing team or environment really looks and feels like?
Oh man, you're just throwing me tough questions. I mean, not because I don't have examples, but in moments when you know you're on a high performing team, they're not always big dramatic events. It feels bad saying this, but sometimes it's just a feeling that you know you're all on the same page. And in hockey, that feeling usually hits me long before our national championship games or big playoff wins. It's sitting in the locker room before a practice, or and you're looking around and you can see every person is bought into what you're doing, from the players that put up the numbers to the players that bring energy to every shift, and everyone knows their role. They also respect each other's contributions, and we all show up with the same level of effort. Maybe like a visual cue, the clearest confirmation of a high performing team is when people you might call your high impact players, the ones that are getting, big minutes, or they're getting on all your special teams assignments, they're working the hardest, if not harder than everyone else. They're not coasting. They're not entitled to their role. They're earning it every day, just like everybody else. Because if your most visible contributors, the face of your team, is taking shortcuts and still getting rewarded, whether it's by the coach or by management or your supervisor, the rest of your team is going to feel it. And you're going to lose that shared motivation of that doubt of people thinking in like, well, why would I push myself? Why would I go the extra mile to do this if like I'm not even gonna get rewarded for it? If like they're gonna make a mistake and continue to make this mistake and be told time and time again they need to stop doing that, and it doesn't matter what they do, they're gonna get rewarded. When that doubt creeps in, that's when you kind of lose that. But when everybody is grinding and blocking shots and forechecking and doing all the small things that nobody sees, suddenly everyone's going to want to match that energy. They all want to be, we used to have a saying called be on the boat, like know your role. The boat doesn't run without, people pushing the oars and working the sail, from people that like feed the crew to clean, to steer the boat. Be on the boat, match that energy. And that's when a team becomes something special.
I like that metaphor. That's really good. Once everyone is on the boat, though, when you're on the same page, like you talked about, there's trust, there's momentum. How can a team sustain that over time?
For me, the answer's actually really simple. You sustain that trust and that momentum with accountability, which is one of my foundation pillars of building trust. In my talk, I talked about how trust is the game changer, but trust is fragile. It doesn't stay strong just because a team once worked together. Trust stays strong because the behaviors that built it keep happening and over again, just like you would iron out metal. So when a team is really clicking, whether it's on the ice or engineering, you feel it. People communicate freely, they're aligned on a goal, no one's holding back an effort. That's what trust creates. It turns a group of individuals into something cohesive. Trust isn't the finish line, it's the loop. It gets reinforced or weakened every single day. And that's where accountability becomes the backbone of that trust. So in sports, accountability, like I said, is immediate. If you're supposed to back check, you back check. Everyone sees your effort and everyone sees your follow through, and it's not punishment based, it's commitment based. You show up for your team because the team's showing up for you. And I found the exact same in engineering, in project environments. Trust stays strong when people consistently do what they say they would do. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but reliably. Accountability in engineering is something simple as like following through on a deliverable you promised, communicating early when something changes and not letting it fester, owning your piece again when something goes wrong, resetting expectations instead of people saying, well, this is changing this, and just getting ahead of it and saying, I know we're in the gray area and I know we like to have certainty in what we're doing. This is how we're going to progress through the gray area to get more clarity that we need. Those are the behaviors that keep momentum from slipping, because when accountability is strong, everybody knows the standards. No one has to guess. No one has to feel like they're carrying the load alone. I guess the best analogy that I can leave you with is, think of trust as the spark and accountability is what keeps the fire burning.
That's really good. You got a lot of these. I feel like there's also a career in motivational speaking, most definitely.
You're the first person that's ever told me that. I did not know I had a
What?
calling.
Well, we're going to start a wave with this. Katherine, this has been such a insightful conversation, chock full of imagery and symbolism, but it also beautifully ties into our theme this year of embrace your story. For the engineers who are listening to this, who may not realize how their personal experiences can shape their leadership, their trajectory in this field, whether that's sports, hobbies, even life outside of work, what advice would you give to that engineer who's listening?
I'm with you, Sam. I really love this year's theme, embrace your story, because it's something I've had to learn myself. For a long time, I used to think of my life in buckets. There was hockey Catherine and engineering Catherine, and almost like those kind of identities or parts of me were separate. But over time, I realized that you don't have to split yourself up to be a strong engineer or a strong leader. In fact, the opposite is true. The more you we say bring your whole self to work, the more authentic and confident and effective you become. Hockey is a big part of who I am, but it's just one part. I'm also an engineer. I'm also a teammate. I'm also someone who really cares about creating a great culture and bringing collaboration and energy and learning, and being able to bring all those pieces of who I am outside of work into my work, not just my technical skills, has made my career richer, and it's helped me build genuine connections with people around me. You get to break down that surface level of, how are you doing? Good, good. Okay, let's get into what we're doing. Or how was your weekend? Fine, fine. And getting, even if it's just one little thing somebody can latch onto, that's a connection that I now know I can go talk to somebody and say, hey, I remember us talking about this. I need some help on this. And you get to know people as people just by being who you are. We underestimate how powerful our personal experiences really are. We think leadership only comes from certifications and project experiences and technical depth. And yes, those things matter, but the things that make you, they also come from the things that shaped you long before you walked into your first job. For me, that's sports. Maybe for somebody else, it's being an artist or being a parent. And those experiences make you who you are. They teach you resilience and empathy and problem solving and discipline. And those are the exact traits that engineering and technical teams and teams in general rely on. And so my advice for any engineer listening to this is, don't hide those parts of yourself. Use them, share them, let them influence how you lead and how you communicate and how you collaborate. Because like I said, people connect with people, not job titles. When you embrace your story, you also give everyone else around you permission to embrace theirs and bring who they are to the table. That, to me, I have seen creates more diverse thinking, more psychological safety, more trust, which, as we've talked about today, is the true game changer for any team. I leave with, whatever your story is, whether it's sports or hobbies or family or experiences that you've had, bring it with you. That's where your leadership begins, and that's what makes you not just a good engineer, but a meaningful teammate and a memorable leader.
Oh, Catherine, mark my words. Hockey player, engineer, motivational speaker. Add that to the business card. I swear. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for your time.
Oh, Sam, thank you again for having me. It's been great talking with you.
I'm Sam East, and from all of us at SWE, thank you for listening.